Hey guys, how's it going? On today's video, we're going to be completing the rear end of the ultimate E30 5-lug swap. This is continuing with the series, so if you missed the overview video of everything, click the link right here. If you haven't seen the brake rebuild, click up there. And if you haven't seen the diff rebuild, also click right up there. Oh, right there. So in this video, we're going to be completely assembling all of the E30 subframe and the Z3M trailing arms ready to go back into the E30. So I'm going to start with the easiest part first, which is just installing the Gragistic 95A subframe, raised subframe bushings. So it's pretty simple. Just take them apart. You want to make sure that the recessed edge is on the top, and you want the fatter edge on the bottom. So I'm going to push that through, and then we're just going to line the holes up with the pins, tilt that, put it in from the bottom. If you have any trouble, you can put them in the freezer for a couple hours, and it should shrink them just a tiny bit. And then we're just going to push the one on top in, and then clamp them together, and that's it. And there you go. You have your subframe bushings installed. I'm going to go do the other side, and then we'll move on to assembling the rear trailing arms. So this is actually my second time making this video. I finished the other side, which was a complete pain. So I figured I'd stop filming there and just finish it, so I know exactly what to do for the second one, and what tips to not mess up. So if you see clips that are a little different than the progress we're at currently, then I'm kind of mixing back and forth between everything I filmed. Just to start off with, make sure you label all your bolts and make sure everything's nice and organized when you take it apart. I thought I lost bolts, but I ended up finding them, which is fantastic. Also, I just put the bearing in the freezer for it to shrink just a little bit. It was an absolute pain to get it in yesterday. And I also put it in a little bit crooked, and it went in crooked, so I had to push it back out. Thank God the bearing was still good and usable, so that side is done. So bearings in the freezer. I also put the little dowel pins that go in between the bushings in the freezer, just to shrink just a tiny bit. They're not going to be in there very long. All the part numbers will be in the description for all the parts, but we'll quickly go over everything. We got the dust shield, axle nut, Gragistic tie down for the rear strut, brake shoes. This is a C-clip. We got the bearing, the hub, the e-brake springs, and the adjuster, the E30 ABS delete. And then Z3 trailing arms do not come with brake lines that route like an E30 does, that route along the trailing arm into the chassis. So I stole these off a separate arm that I had from an E30, and they will still form fit. I mean, you could still use the same mounting points around to route the hard line, so that your E30 brake line goes from the caliper to the hard line. The hard line goes through the trailing arm, or the side of the trailing arm. Then it'll hit another soft line, which will then go to another hard line all the way to the front of your chassis. So you are gonna need these, or you'd have to run a really long brake line all the way through. So that's the better way to do it. I will then also install my Motorsport Hardware kit later when the hubs are installed and everything's on the car, so I could use the e-brake to stop the rotor from spinning. I also have the e-brake cable. It's just laying on the floor over there. The brake, and then also the brake caliper is, not the brake caliper, brake rotor is on the floor as well. So again, I'm going to start with the easy stuff, get those installed, and then we'll get getting the bearing pressed in, and then this, and then dealing with the brake shoes behind the hub is just easier, and then we can just press the hub in. Like I did yesterday, I'm just going to start with kind of the easier stuff first. So that's with the bushings. You want the fat side on the outside. These are the Gragistic 95A trailing arm bushings. So took the bushings out of the freezer. Fat end goes on this side. small end goes on this side. So you could use a mallet, you can do it by hand, or I have this tool by AKG that helps you either take them out or put them in. This is what the tool looks like. So you put it on, you cut the ends off your OEM bushings, put it through, and then just using the washer, you'd pull the bushing out. Or if you want to put the bushing in, you just put the two caps on and put the ring. I'll flip this around because you're not supposed to use power tools with it. I used power tools with it and I messed it up a little bit. The threads are a little boogered. Okay, now that the bushings are nice and pressed in, we're going to get on to putting in the wheel bearing. Still in the freezer, so I'm going to go get that. But we're using a, it's like a ball joint set. You can find them at Harbor Freight, or you can rent them at your local auto parts store. It's missing a few because I was trying to do it, but basically you can use it to pull out the bearing or use it to press in the bearing. So I'm gonna seat the bearing, make sure it's nice and straight, put the tool all together and clamp it down, and I will show you guys how to pull it in. So I just popped the bearing in there, give it a few taps so it's kind of in. Looks to be nice and even. So what you're going to do is you're going to take, I like to start with a bigger one than what it is, and then I'll get a smaller one once we get in there. So I have one that's going to sit in the back, and it sits like perfectly in the crevice. You have your nut. I have just some vice grips on it. So you're going to go like this. You can go through it. You're going to put it on the back, and then you're going to feed the long nut through the back. I did it all by hand yesterday, and it was an absolute pain. The best way to do would just be to press it in using a press. Unfortunately, you kind of need to stack about maybe 6 inches of something behind this to clear, the subframe so you don't mess it up. So that I spent all that time yesterday doing it by hand, I'm going to attempt to do it. I pulled the hub on yesterday with the impact, so I'm going to try to pull the bearing in with the impact and see how that goes. And if it doesn't go well, you will see it first, and then I'll just do it all by hand again. But I'm actually going to transfer this to the floor so it's not rattling the table. So now we're on the padded floor. The big nut on the rear uses a 32, and then this I think is like a 24 or 25. Okay, now that we're back at the table, we do have to put a snap ring in to make sure that the bearing does not pop out or anything. This is kind of a pain, so I highly recommend wearing safety glasses or a face shield. These are some pretty thick snap rings, and they can really poke an eye out if messed up. So what I like to do is kind of set it against it. So we got one side in, now we just got to get the other. There we go. All clipped in. Looks good to me. So now that the snap ring's in, we're going to install the new dust shield. So it's two 10 mils and two 14 mils. I'm just going to pull this slightly off the table, bring the camera back a little bit so I can put this on. So it just nicely fits on there. There we go. I'm going to put blue thread locker on all the bolts. So now let's move on to putting on the e-brake and the e-brake shoes. So I am using an E30 e-brake in a Z3 trailing arm, Z3M trailing arm, because the e-brake lines are two different lengths. So what you'll do is just feed it through the bottom. So the line's going to be extra stiff going in. So it's in, and just to seat it, I'm just going to use a mallet and just tap it in. That's seated in there. Here we have the e-brake line with the spring. Obviously, once it's in the car, you're going to want to adjust it more. So what you're going to take is this piece that has a little pin in it. And so what this does is when it pulls, when you pull the e-brake, it'll pull it this way, which then pushes the e-brake shoe out, which will then touch the rotor. So I'm going to put a little grease here, and some grease on the inside so it moves nice and easy. And then I set the other one up that you want this piece where it's opening to the back of the trailing arm. So I'm going to add some grease. We just have some red and tacky all-purpose anti-seize, all-purpose grease. So take some of that, put a little bit there and there, some more. Not putting a crazy amount, but just enough so that it's well lubricated. Creates a little bit of a mess, but it's all good. So what we're gonna do is, again, I have it set up so I want it in the back. So the e-brake shoe is gonna go, it's gonna go in here. You're gonna slide the pin in, and then you're gonna close it up. And there it is. I'm just gonna add a little bit more grease on the edge there. Okay, so what I found the easiest thing to do is to start with the 2 pins, 1 and 2, which are these things right here. And let me grab the e-brake shoes, which is right behind here. So you want, so that you can see that there's 2 different sides to this. You want the smaller side on the bottom and the larger side on the top. So what I'll start with is putting the springs in. You're gonna want an Allen key. I'm using a number, what is this, number 5. If that'll focus. Hard to see, but it's a number 5. So you're just gonna put it in straight, and you can look from behind, and you're just gonna push it into place. Push it in and give it a turn. Oop, almost got it. This one's being more difficult than the last. Okay, there we go. Put it in and turn. Locks it into place. And then we're going to do the same thing for the other side. Take it, put it in. And make sure it's straight. And just push it through and turn. So now the e-brake shoes are locked into place. Next, if that doesn't want to seat, we'll just move on to the top. This is your adjuster screw. The way I did it for the last one was it facing this way, which was facing the rear. So I'm gonna face this one this way this time. I don't think it makes a huge difference on which way it goes. Obviously, if it does, put it in the comments. So that's that. Then I'm going to do the upper spring because it's a lot easier to pull. So we'll just feed that through here. And then grab a hook on a pick. Then just pull it across until it seats itself, which might take a few tries as they are pretty tensioned. There we go. So now that we got the top done, we're gonna seat the bottom, which this one definitely is a lot more of a pain because the top is not on. So We're just gonna seat that in there, and then we'll seat that one there. It might want to pop out on you, but so this is the real pain one, the bigger, thicker spring. So, you know, put it in the one side, and then just like the top, the pick and trying to push it in, that is the best way to do it. So let's see if I can get this on camera. Kind of bending the pick a little bit, so you want to be careful. You are supposed to use there's a special brake line or drum brake tool that you could use, but I was able to get the other one, so let's see if I can do it again. There we go. There we go. Everything's on. It definitely is a pain to do, but everything is on. I'm going to adjust the screw, just open it just a tiny bit. You'll do more adjustment once it's actually in the car with the e-brake line. So, but everything looks to be good and taut. Let me make sure that the screws are correct, and they look to be. So that is how you do the e-brake shoes, and then we'll press the hub on the same way we did the bearing. That's why I said you should do this first, because it's behind it, so it's easier to get to all the springs and everything that it's without the hub on. So I'm gonna go back to the floor and get the hub positioned on, and then we'll zap that in, and that'll basically be done with the rear end. So just like I did the bearing, I have the tool going through with a thing on the back. I'm gonna put the impact on the back and just pull it through. And there you go. Hub is in. Nice and smooth. So you can see why it's easier to do the e-brake shoes from behind now. Because when you're looking straight on, I mean, it basically covers everything that it's hard to get to. So, hub's on. We can test fit the rotor. The rotor just goes on, put the screw in. Everything's good. What else to do? Oh, put the axle in. I'm gonna clean up the splines of the axle, slip it through, and then do that. I'm gonna wait to torque it till everything's all together, and I could stick a screwdriver and make sure it's torqued down properly. So I'm gonna grab the axle, stick that through, put the nut on, and put the rotor on, and then do the brakes, and we're done. So with the new hub, the axle and just clean up the splines on the axle, it should just slide right in with really no issues whatsoever. Shouldn't even need a pop. Nope, see? Slides right in. Just gonna take the locking nut. A little bit of weight on the front now. So just pop that on there. I'm gonna put blue thread locker and then torque it down once everything is assembled. There you go. Thread that in. And whatever is still popping out, it'll pull itself through. So that is pretty much it. I'm going to grab a piece of wood, put it on the floor. We'll put this on the floor. We'll put the rotor and the brakes on, and then we will be pretty much done with the rear end. Minus I still have to route the brake lines on them. So put it on the floor and we'll finish this up. So for final assembly, we're just gonna add on the garagistic rear tie down. I'm just gonna loosely put it on there. That will go on the outside of the strut. The ABS delete, which is just this nice piece from Garagistic, fits nice and beautifully right there. Just gonna add some blue thread locker onto this nut. Again, no like real torque, so I'm just gonna put it to as tight as I can get it. Then we're gonna loosely fit the Motorsport Hardware stud kit right here. They're 72 millimeter 5x120 with the Allen keys. I'm gonna red Loctite them, or blue, I forget what they call for, once they're on the car or once the brakes are on. So I'll show that temporarily, but just to fit everything up, We have a nice drilled and slotted rotor. And then I'm just gonna, again, loosely doing this. You will finish installing the rotor and the brakes and everything while it's on the car, just because you need to adjust the e-brake shoes. So that's nice and going right there. I'm gonna grab the caliper. Bolt it in. So here we go. Excuse the mess, but there we go. That's the rear end. Almost complete. Just gotta run the hard lines on the trailing arms and bop those bushings in to the subframe and mount it to the diff. Oh, there it goes. So I'm just gonna use a mallet, pop those bushings in so they're nice and fit. Then I'll start going through bolting in the diff, and I will update you when I get that done. It took some time, but with some gentle persuasion, with a mallet, rubber mallet, I was able to get all of them set in. So I did my best to try to get it closer to 0, which means you want to set them all the way to like where it's original. So this is caster and this would be toe. So you'd want to set this. So this is the rear of the car towards the front of the car. You'd want to set this as close to the front of the car as possible. And then for the toe as well, you want to set it as low as possible. So I'm going to get the axles all mounted up. I have the bolts sitting in the greaser over here. Make sure you will be wanting Z3M hardware, or actually, well, just the brackets need to be Z3M. I'm going to be probably using E30 Allen key nuts or Allen key bolts to mount it. They're about the same. I'll show you the difference. And that should be just fine. Okay, so I got one axle loosely on. So I want to show you the difference between these are what came off the car when I did it. They're E-Torques. And then these are E30 ones, they're Allens. So the thread is the same. You can just see that the E30 is just slightly longer, which you can see as they will stick out just a tiny bit past the flange. So these will work. And then you want to make sure that you use the Z3M brackets, because the E30 brackets are, so this one's E30, this one's that. You can see they are not the same size. So you need to make sure you use Z3M flanges or brackets when installing the axles. So I'm going to get this side fitted up real quick. It's just threading the bolts in by hand, and then I'll get to torquing them down. Okay, so I got the other one bolted up. I'm going to now torque them to about 60. E30 is like 50, 55, and Z3M is anywhere between 60 and I think like 80. 80 is really high though. So I might go 55, 60 for the axles. I'm going to take them each one out, put blue Loctite on, and then put them back in, and then do all of them and then torque them. So now I'm going to finish torquing the stud kit for the diff. So I'm going to torque the nuts to 40 foot-pounds, and I'm going to put some thread locker, some blue thread locker on them as well. So I'm going to do that. And I finished torquing the axles. I still need to torque the axle nut. So a quick tip is just put a screwdriver in between your rotor and against your caliper, and it'll stop everything from spinning so you can move it around. So I'm going to torque the stud kit, and then I'll come back and torque the axle nut. Okay, so now that I got those torqued to 40 foot-pounds and those torqued, I'm going to torque the axle nut. It is 200, it's between 210 and like 221 is what I've seen. So I'm going to go 215 right in the middle. I'm going to go 215, 215. Luckily the torque wrench I have goes up that high, but you could always just use an impact or something to do it. So I'm going to get that done, and then we're almost done. A few more things to do. So here we go, 36 millimeter socket, 12 point, and then 2 15 foot-pounds. doing this on the floor by myself, so wish me luck, and I'm gonna get this stuff done. So that was actually easier than I thought. So now I'm gonna go through and knock these pins in to lock it into place, just with like a screwdriver. Okay, now that I got the pin, the nut bashed in, we're going to install the Motorsport hardware stud kit. So it says to use blue medium thread locker, and we'll torque them to 25 foot-pounds. I am using their black race studs, not their silver studs. So there you go for reference. And then you're going to want to torque your wheels to, I got 12 by 1.5, so it's going to be 90 foot-pounds. So there you go. I'm going to go ahead and put blue thread lock on all of them, put them in, and torque them down. So this is how I'm going to be doing the brake line. So I stole the brake line off a just an E30 trailing arm, regular, because Z3M brake lines, they come out and then they kind of just go up into the chassis, or up to right where the caliper is basically. So E30 calipers, they kind of are. Let's see, I can show you actually. Here we go. Excuse the mess. You can see how it comes off right there, and then it loops around to that piece on the dust shield. These are new dust shields, and I should have maybe welded a tab on here so that I could do something like that. Oh, I'm not even pointing in the right direction. I can do something like that, but it does have this little nut here. So more than likely what I'm going to do is either zip tie this a little bit closer to here, or figure out something to screw on here and have this connect. But on the E30 trailing arm, so it nicely goes around, down, and then under on that side, and then up and around, and you can see it come out right there. So you could see it right here where it comes down, goes down, across, and then over. So it does about the same, so it goes down and then over, and it is resting just on the bottom instead of coming nicely around and tucking up against the side here. On the E30, there's little pins that you can connect it to run it through. I could bend it more and really make it press fit, make my own line, but I'm just going to leave it for now until I see a reason that it needs to be changed, or once it's on the car, I could see what needs to be modified. Because the car's never going to be that low to where the bottom of the trailing arm is going to be hitting the ground. So unless I'm jumping it, which I don't plan on doing. So that should be fine. I will bring this a little bit closer and then run it there. So let me show you on the other side. Let me grab a clip. I don't know where I put the other one. Oh, there it is. Okay. So here's the line. There it is. So just gonna feed it under. I have all these wood blocks that kind of in the way, so it's easier if you mount it through here first, lay it underneath all the way through and back around, and then it's kind of hard to do with one hand. So I'm gonna go up here and just kind of bend that in. Sorry, I wasn't even filming. Bend that in here, and then we're kind of left with this to be just around here. So you'll take the clip and you're going to go this way. So this will feed into the back of this, and then you'll feed the brake line through, and then just attach the brake line here. Always start here, because then this will reposition itself for this so that they're closer together. So I'm going to get this side quickly done, and the last few things to do would be to fill the diff, and then I still need to adjust the e-brake shoes, which will have to be done in the car with the e-brake lines, and bolt the caliper down. So that's pretty much it for the rear end. I'll probably have a video on installing the Ireland Engineering sway bars out before this video, so go check that out right here. And yeah, get this brake line done, and then I'm going to clean up and maybe do some product shots for it. Okay, now that the brake lines are installed, you can see that you could make this come out a little bit more and tuck in here to come back around, or even put a 90 here so it's straight into this. This is not too bad of a bend. So that is how she's looking. I also put in the little collars that go for the subframe. When you take it out, those will be on top of your old bushings. Take them out, clean them up, put them back on, and this is ready to go back in the car. So I'm going to clean up everything around it and take some photos and then put it up on my table cart. Highly recommend one of those. Super easy pulling. Rear ends takes 30 seconds, or 2 jacks, one on the front of the subframe, one on the diff, and just raise it in, excuse me. So I'm going to clean everything up and get this in the car. Oh, we still need to install the studs too, so I will show that before I put this in. So these are the rear end links. I'm going to quickly disassemble them before I put them in. So this is the reinforcement plate that goes onto your sway bar that Ireland Engineering includes. There are many companies like Logistic that sell it as well. So that just gets sandwiched in there. And then we can compare the bucket to the stock one. You can see how thin the stock one is compared to this. So you always want to make sure you upgrade your end links. This I will simply just install loosely into the trailing arm so that when we line everything up, we can then tighten it into place. So I actually had to go back through and drill out the holes to 7/16 to make sure that this fits nice and snug in there. So just one washer on top, one washer on the bottom. I know you can't see much right now. And then again, just loosely installing this onto the trailing arm. So there we go. Okay, so now that this is complete, let's go install it in the car. Before we just go straight to installing, let's go knock out the old subframe bolts and go put the new ones in. I did have to drill, or these are for the Ireland Engineering sway bars. Videos linked right there. I did have to drill out the hole just a little bit to make those fit to I think it was 7/16. So go check that video out for the full install, and let's knock these out. There is the subframe bolt. So we're just gonna whack it from the bottom, and it will pop out. It's gonna pop out right in there. There's some dirt in mine, but sometimes it could be filled with like a sealer. So take that out, and then you're just gonna knock it up. There you go. You can see the subframe bolt right there. Reach around my cage. Oh, I dropped it. Nice. And voila. Not bad. Not a bad bolt. Just figured I'd replace them. They're like 16 bucks each, so if you really don't, like, you don't have to replace them, but I'm going to. So now that the subframe bolts are installed, I'm gonna put this onto this table cart. So basically what you do is you just pump it and it goes up. So I'm gonna put that on here. Make sure it's nice and even. You just want to make sure that it's not this way and it's not this way, but it's nice, perfectly flat when it's going in, because then it'll just slide up right in there, super easy. So I'm gonna get that on the table cart, and then I'm going to put it in the car. So something I missed reading when doing the serrated hardware is when you use the raised subframe bushings, you need to notch the frame, or I'm gonna see if I can just notch the serrated part itself, but it's definitely gonna hit. It's not even close to making it. I totally forgot to do that. Looks like those should be fine, maybe not. Oh, I really don't want to drop this thing again. Dang it. So with the clearancing issue, I called my buddies over at Logistic, and they said that I probably should just be running the regular subframe bushings instead of the raised, just because I'm not going slammed, and because of the serrated hardware, that it's just better to be running the standard. So that being said, I'm going to carefully try to separate the bushings and hopefully not have to drop the whole subframe again. That'd suck. So I'm going to attempt to do that. So I know it looks like kind of a mess. I was able to pull out the raised subframe bushings by hand, thankfully, and I was able to swap out and get some regular subframe bushings, still 95A, but these will correct the problem of the clearancing issue. If you have any questions ever on your build, please reach out to them before you place an order, just so you make sure you get exactly what you want. So I'm gonna get these pushed in. So it's gonna be the thicker side on top, the thinner side on the bottom. You want to make sure that the groove side is also on the top. Unfortunately, since I'm not using the raised subframe bushings anymore, I will need to take the diff spacers out. So once I get that attached, I'll probably then drop the diff. Not very excited about that one, but you know, you learn. This is all new, so we're learning together. So I'm gonna get these installed into the subframe, have the subframe hopefully installed by the next clip, and then we'll work on getting the diff out again. Okay, so what I found easiest to do is you don't want to install the subframe bolt until you have the bushing seated, and the bushing, the cylinder inside the bushing seated. Because the second you have it seated, the bolt will drop, you know, right down. It's right here. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a 15 mil, and that fits right in the hole of the subframe bolt, and just give it a few taps down. So there's the 15, and then I'm just give it a few taps just to seat it. Then I'm going to take the nut and pull it down just a little bit, so that then I can put the bracket on. And then we'll also be installing the race German rear jack point. So I'll pull the bolt down so it seats itself enough where I can get the bracket on, and then we'll tighten everything up. I already got the other side done. So this is the last side, and then the subframe is in, and then we're just gonna have to worry about pulling the bushings or the studs out of the diff. So let me go through and do that, and then we'll be right back. Okay, so I got the bolt in a little bit, I got the nut on, and I got the bracket seated. So then we're just gonna install the race German rear jack points. So the L is gonna go on the inside to protect the pinch weld, and then you'll just take the Allen bolts, put some blue thread locker on, and just put them in basically until you can't turn them anymore. So I'm gonna quickly install those, and then I'm gonna torque this to 85 foot-pounds with some blue Loctite also on the nut, and then we'll worry about the diff. Okay, everything's been torqued down with blue Loctite. Again, 85 foot-pounds for the diff bushing. That's what between 80 and 90 is what people say they torque them to. Most people are like, just hit it with an impact until it stops, and that's good. So that's what I torqued it to. And then just the race German jack points, I just torqued until, you know, they didn't really want to move anymore by hand. So next thing to do, I'm going to move the table cart back and do it under the diff, and I'm just going to lower the diff where it's at. I got to undo the bolt holding it on the other side, drop it down, take the nuts off, drop it as far as I can get it, hopefully where I can just slip the spacers off and then just put it back up. The extended studs are great, but you know, it's not a big deal. They're not gonna be interfering with anything. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that, and hopefully once that's done, we will move on to just buttoning up everything in the rear, adjusting the parking brakes, doing the brake lines up there, and then we should be done with the rear end. Excuse the spring, but now that the diff is situated, everything is correct now with all the bushings. I'm going to get to feeding through the e-brake lines into the holes and tightening up the brake line, which is just a 14 and an 11. And then we will get to, I'm going to put in struts temporarily and springs, even though I won't be using these, but just to set up all the sway bar stuff and get everything level. And then we should be done with the rear end. So I'm underneath the car and working on putting the e-brake cable in. So it's pretty, since it's a new cable, it's pretty tight, and it almost doesn't really want to fit, and it barely pops out on the actual e-brake. side itself. So as you could see, I kind of just tapped it in to seat itself, so it's really not going to go anywhere. Although I am worried that I do have the trailing arm jacked up to closer to what, you know, what the ride height will be, and even it'll go even higher, so that might help. But if it's not, if it like the second I let the jack go, this might just rip out of right here. So maybe even need a longer e-brake line, but that should do to start, and I'll make it work with what I got. So what I found easiest about doing the brake lines is before I put it in, I installed it onto the trailing arm with this side, and I found that it's easier to take it off, and it's easier just to thread it in like by hand, be able to turn it into the chassis side, and then just simply reattach it to the trailing arm. So I got the e-brake on, about to finish this up. I got to drill the holes for the secondary diff mount, and I gotta swap the bolt around because it's messing with the spring temporarily. Zip tie up the speedo cable, and the install of the rear end is complete. So let me button the last things up and we'll be done. Okay, so now we're in the car installing the e-brake cable. There is enough slack, you just need to make sure that the ridges line up with the hole, and then you can get it through. Kind of hard to do while filming, but you just need to twist it the right angle. Oh, there you go, see? Catches. And then just keep screwing. Okay. So I'm going to screw those a little bit more. You want to get that metal piece all the way through, or just till it's nice and tight without the rears rubbing. So I'm going to tighten those down a little bit more, and then we'll go adjust the brake shoes. So I just put a few threads on the e-brake handle, just so it's on there and, you know, it's not going to back out. So now I'm going to take the rotor off, hang it up to this point with some zip ties, and then we'll go through and adjust the insides. So what I've read and watched is you want it just barely touching. Most people did it with the wheel on. I'm going to do it with the wheel off and just spin it by hand. You just want it just barely touching, and then obviously it'll wear itself in, and then, you know, you won't have an issue. So I'm going to take off the caliper, hang it, and then start adjusting from the inside. So I don't really know if it's the proper way or not, but I'm just, since everything's brand new, along with the e-brake cables, I'm just going to actually set this to 0, like, so there's no adjustment, and then I'm just going to adjust the actual handbrake itself. So I'm going to do that. I'm just going to spin this back down to 0, and then just to where this is just grazing on the wheel. Now that I got everything set back, I got the brake shoes adjusted, and I got the rotor back on, I'm gonna torque blue Loctite and then torque the caliper bolts to 45 foot-pounds, and I'll do both sides, and then that is it. The rear end is finished. Just got to add some junk struts, and then put it on the floor. So now we're going to torque it down to, it's actually 48 Newton meters on a 17. So let me go do that, do the other side, put the junk struts in, and let's put it on the ground. There she is. First time on the ground 5-lug. Woo! There's the poke. Not bad, not bad. Ooh. Caster is, or the toe, excuse me, the toe is awful on this side. Woo! Let's see how this side is. Oh, not bad. That side's towed in, and this one's tiny bit towed in, so that's not too bad. Definitely could use some camber adjustment on both sides. Excuse the mess, guys. But very exciting. 5-lug rear end done. So yeah, e-brake works, which actually should be on at the moment. Make sure that's up. There you go. Everything's done. BMW E30 5-lug using Z3M trailing arms with a Z3M fin diff, 2.93 LSD, motorsport hardware, stud kit, you know, the whole 9 yards. So if you guys have any questions, put them down in the comment section below. Don't forget to like, subscribe. If you saw anything I did wrong, also put that in the comments. Love to hear your feedback. And then in the next video, we get started on assembling the front end. So again, thank you guys for watching. Have a great day.